Hello and welcome to Florida Basketball Hour. I am Neil Blackman, Saturday Down South. On this episode, really kind of a by request situation. I got a lot of not calls, a lot of DMs and text messages saying, "Hey, are you going to talk about the draft? Are you going to break down where Florida's players ended up in the draft?" And so, yeah, why not? We'll get into all of that. All three of the guards that Elijah Martin said have the underdog legacy were drafted. Walter Clayton in the first round, 18th overall to the Jazz. Elijah Martin, 39th overall to the Raptors. And Will Richard at 51 to Golden State. I know I had predicted accurately the range for all three players. I told you guys to watch 16 to 20 for Walt. He went 18th. I shouldn't give myself too much credit for Martin because I did miss. I said 41 to 60, and he went earlier than I thought at 39. And then Will Richard. And I know a lot of people saw, and people were asking me before day two. And by the way, the NBA draft has got to go back to like the 1 day system. There's just not enough content round one for it to be like super entertaining television 2 nights in a row. But on the other hand, I guess the cool thing is for the second round players, they kind of get their moment too. We saw Elijah there up in the green room for round 2, which was neat. Had that 6 suit, loved it, representing Pike County, got all those shout outs in, the big chain, all that was super fun. But I still think it's better as like a 1 night program. Anyway, Martin, Clayton Jr. and Richard all drafted. I got a lot of questions about Will Richard more on day 2. I think everybody kind of going into the draft anticipated that Elijah Martin would be selected. He was in every mock but ESPN, and then eventually ESPN went from undrafted to 39th, getting the exact location right. So shout out Jonathan Givony, who clearly had some connections in Toronto and with Elijah's camp to know that he was headed up north. But Golden State was the team to watch for Will Richard. Mike Dunleavy called Todd Golden and told him that they wanted Will. It was just a question of whether they were going to draft him or get him on a 2-way. But I guess they didn't want to leave it to chance that they went 2-way with him. And so they went ahead and made sure they got a trade in place to go and draft him. And I think really in the end, that's awesome. I mean, Will deserves it. He deserves every opportunity to make that roster. I think he was going to be on an NBA roster next year anyway, but just a cool experience of being a draft pick for Will is awesome. I know it was Florida Day on SEC Network the other night. I don't think we've talked enough really about just how special it was to see Will Richard play arguably his best game at Florida. I would say his best game given stage, moment, opportunity in the national championship game. And it wasn't just like, everybody knows he had 14 of Florida's 28 points in the first half, or most people know that. But I thought it was like he also made such big baskets. Like Florida got down 6, Richard bangs the 3. Florida gets down 8, Richard bangs the 3. And then, he found a way to contribute offensively in the second half as well. The big offensive rebound down 62-60 to go to the line, hits both the free throws. Sneaky great free throw shooter his whole career. Like 85% free throw shooter, pretty much automatic at the stripe, especially as a senior. And then all the defensive plays, right? And it wasn't just the swipes on Sharp. Although, of course, those are great. I mean, he had perfect defense. Florida's defense on the final position was really outstanding. Blow up the pistol action first. They had a counter in case the pistol action was blown up. Houck got up and disrupted that, and then Richard makes it hard for Huzon to get the pass off to E. And so Sharp's shot, I think, was later than he would have wanted it, and that allowed for the one shining closeout moment with Walter Clayton Jr. So a lot of that credit to Will Richard's length. Super, super underrated defender, I thought, his senior year, and a guy that we did not talk about enough as one of the best players in the SEC on that side of the basketball. And that was, Will wanted to come back as a senior. When he went to NBA camps and went through the process, he was told, hey, I think the big thing for you is, you've got to show consistently that you'll defend. Will went 56. I said 51st. But I think the other thing with Will was like he wanted to shoot off screens a little more, and Florida was going to give him that opportunity by putting Walt on the ball. And he did shoot off screens a little more. But it was also like Will's competitiveness level, which rose, I think, every year he was in the program. But once Condon and Houck got involved, and then Amar brings it to another level. But I think Will was already kind of there at the end of last year, where he wouldn't let a tough shooting game impact him defensively. And so he became that. He became that 3-and-D player, which is what he'd profile as in the NBA. I think he's almost certain to be on the Warriors roster next season. I'm sure he'll play some G League ball. He is a little undersized for an NBA wing, but he is athletic. And that was one thing that I was shout out Jay Billis, because I heard, that criticism. I think The Athletic made the argument that he's not that athletic. Giovoni made the argument that he's not that athletic, and it's just false. Like in those shuffle drills that they do at the combine and those speed drills, like Richard was in the 91st and 98th percentile. He is quick, man. And so quickness is athleticism. And so when you can compensate for maybe a lack of size with some length, which Will's always had because he's got long arms, and that quickness, the ability to dive down and make those kind of quick plays that he made on Emmanuel Sharp without fouling in the national title game. Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be a useful defensive player in the NBA. And I won't be stunned if he's a guy that lasts a few years on an NBA roster, and isn't off to Europe earlier, where he is good enough to play for a long time. But I think in the NBA, I think he profiles great very well because of his ability to play defense, which I don't think we really did discuss enough while he was at Florida, right? Maybe until his senior year. And then we kind of got into it a little bit, but yeah, I mean, good for him. The Raptors really couldn't guard. Finished 26th in defensive rating last year, but started to guard a little better late in the season. And I think the question for their front office was like, can we sustain that? So they grabbed Murray Boyles, who I thought, I've called him the new fundamental because he reminds me so much of Tim Duncan in that he is a multi-positional defender with tremendous IQ, great hands. He's quick. He can pass. He is a tremendous help defender. He's a shot blocker. And then they got Elijah Martin, who is an absolute tank, as we all know, at 6'2", 215. He is the most fierce competitor, I think, in the draft, or was. 2 Final Fours, one with Florida Atlantic, one with the Gators. He is an outstanding on-ball defender, and maybe even better than I thought. I keep going back to what I saw in San Antonio when a matchup that Fawcett and I did not think was great for him. And I think at least one assistant on Florida's staff last year did not think it was the best matchup for him and was concerned the night before that game. And Elijah Martin shut Tahad Pettiford down. He just fights. He is a scrapper. He makes winning plays. Thinking about the offensive rebounds against UConn, the fact that he was tough enough to challenge JoJo Tugler and attack the basket late in the national title game, get to the free throw line. He is not an elite shooter, but he's a good jump shooter. You know, if you shoot 36% on 800 career attempts in college, I think you're pretty good. And he's a guy that raises the competitiveness level in any locker room, as we all know. You know, I mean, I can't rave enough about sort of that aspect of him because honestly, it's just kind of impossible to. He is a guy that, to me, changes the way that you expect your teammates to play, if that makes sense. Like, he comes in, and it's not just that people feed off his energy. It's that he sets an expectation of how you are supposed to compete. So I think good pick for the Raptors. But I'll be honest, I think it's his offense and sort of his limitations on the ball, his limitations as a passer. Like, if I were to say, what's the world where Elijah Martin doesn't stick in the NBA for 5 to 10 years? And it's that there's just not enough there offensively at all to justify the fact that he's going to be the toughest competitor on the floor almost every night. Because Elijah's the kind of guy that's going to play those games in January and February that players hate in the NBA, and he's going to play them at 110%, at, you know, a 13 out of 10 speed-wise. And so, to me, like, that's where he'll make a lot of his money, and that's great. I think that he sticks, but that's what I would circle, is just that sort of offensive ability. I forgot about one other quality Will Richard has, which that he's a phenomenal finisher at the rim. You know, last year, I don't have his numbers. Let me see what his 2-point field goal percentage. So for Will last season, he was 56%, 59.2% effective field goal percentage, which is 108th in the country. And he was 67% on his twos, which most of that, you know, he did have occasional 16, 17 footers, but the bulk of Will's twos were outstanding finishes at the rim. It's an area he improved his game the most. And I think, you know, there's another way he should be able to score a little bit in the NBA and impact winning. So those two guys, Martin, Richard, taken in the second day. Walter Clayton Jr., another guy that, you know, Golden State was interested in. The Warriors debated going and getting him, which is a testament to what they thought of him as a shot maker. I think he's the best shot maker in the class that isn't Trey Johnson. And I know Ace Bailey is he'd be in that group too, and the Jazz took both of them. But the thing about Walter is that it's all proven. And the idea of him playing sort of with Ace Bailey and under a coach who runs the kind of stuff that Will Hardy runs really kind of gives you, I think it's a really unique and good fit, especially now that they've shipped Colin Sexton out, and it's very clear that Walt's going to play 20 to 25, maybe 26, 27 minutes as a freshman, as a first-year pro, as a rookie. I have watched an obscene amount of Jazz tape since the Clayton pick. I think they are perfect for him. They're creative. They run a ton of counters where you could get Walt going off the ball. They play pretty quick, and their actions are quick, all things that Walter Clayton has feasted on. Will Hardy has already built a team that was, I think, good offensively, given like what they had to work with last year. It's staggering to me that they were 11th in half-court offensive efficiency and 9th overall in offensive efficiency in the second half of the season. It gives you an idea of just what they're doing. That's so good. They'll run flare screens. They've got Lauri Markkinen, who I think is a guy that, obviously is a big talent. I think that they like to do that, run him off the screens. Those are really big plays because, while you have all your pistol actions, it's kind of the most common NBA action. Teams cover the baseline first, and they've got to be ready for the chase action that follows when a player comes off a zoom or a DHO, which is another thing Walt did a lot at Florida. So he's going to have familiarity with that. And then, we saw how the Thunder were kind of masters of nail help and slanting towards the side of the floor. So, I think Walt passing into those flare screens gives him a chance to kind of create in that mechanism. And that's good. I also think when you cover the flare screen well, you can get the ball back to a Bailey or a Clayton in pick and roll. And, I think Walt's improved show as a willing driver and finisher as a senior is a positive. I still think he can improve in that area, but I like, that aspect of the fit for him. And so they run a ton of that stuff, which I think is pretty interesting. The other thing is that, like, just the way that they run their handoffs, whether, it's for guys like Clayton Jr. when teams don't respect his shooting. So, they like to punish the off coverage and get them a head start as they get towards the basket. I think that kind of stuff is certainly things that Walter can feast in. I love that fit for Walt a whole lot. I am really excited about the opportunity he'll have. I think from a maturity level, he will absolutely raise the competitiveness bar for Ace Bailey. I think part of bringing in a guy like Walt is that it's a high floor kind of swing, and your kind of low floor is Bailey because of his immense tools and gifts, where he could be a perennial all-star, but he's got to get more mature to be an impact player. And I think Clayton, who's a guy Utah jumped Miami for to get to 18, held off Golden State. Golden State was thinking about trading into 19. I know Walt has questions on defense, but we saw that he will compete on defense in the moment, and it'll be interesting. I think that'll be his MO in the NBA, is he'll be a guy who competes when kind of it's necessary. I hate putting it that way, but we've all watched NBA games. Like, I'm not sure Walt Clayton's second quarter NBA defense is going to be the same as it is in the fourth quarter, but that's okay. I think Clayton could easily become not just a high-end scorer off the bench, but a guy who, as he improves his ball screen reads in Hardy's offense, I think he become a long-time perennial starter and maybe even an all-star. I thought it was a great pick. Obviously, the thing about Walt is, he's such a great shooter and playmaker. And I think his on-ball defense was a little underrated towards the end of his senior year, even if his off-ball defense kind of was a mess, as we saw him get lost a little bit on that last play in the national title game. That plus his winning pedigree. Look, I think he's one of the better picks outside the lottery in the draft. And that's even before, like, you dive in to kind of the stuff that they do. Another thing, Walt is savage off the double stagger. We saw the Florida with that stagger rescreen shot for Walt in the national title game. Walt shot 42.5 off screens from beyond the arc last year. They've got a bunch of reads for their double stagger looks, the Jazz do. Some of them are ghost screens where a player will ghost the initial stagger and then they return to get kind of a skip pass, and that creates space. for young guards. They do that with Keontae George. They did it with Colin Sexton some. I think they'll use some of those plays to get Walter Clayton the ball with a little bit more space. Certainly some of those for Ace Bailey, maybe even more than they do for Walt. But for me, like the set plays, Utah runs a ton of them, which is something you do with a young team. But Will Hardy believes in it even more. I think that stuff's going to be great for Walt coming in. He was pretty lethal when Florida went set to him, period, into discussion last year. And my guess is that continues. So fantastic fit. Happy for Walt. Can't wait to get my Walter Clayton Jr. jersey for my my stepson, who actually asked for an Elijah Martin Raptors jersey. So, maybe I should look for that. But I'm gonna have to watch like Elijah in the summer league because I don't know if I'm gonna have to start out with that G League jersey or I can just go straight up Raptors 55 for A-Mart. No, we'll see. We'll see. That Will Richard number 3 looked clean on Warriors Twitter. But excited. The Underdog legacy from 0-star recruits to 2-3-star football recruits to NBA draft picks. An incredible story. Want to get into the schedule a little bit as we look forward to the 2025-2026 season. Florida's schedule is out. And they open the season in Las Vegas, kind of a semi-away game against Arizona. The home opener 3 days later, the classic North Florida Ospreys game. And then another home game 5 days later when the Seminoles and Luke Laux, year one for the Noles, post Leonard Hamilton, come to town. Like in those first 3 games for the Gators, think that they can get off to a nice 3-0 start. Arizona will be a test. It'll be a fun game, I think. Everybody will get up and down, and that's why I like Florida in it, because I think Florida is the one more likely to string together a bunch of stops. And then Florida's going to play Miami at a neutral site. I know it says TBA. I think it'll be Miami and Jacksonville, from everything I understand. Then they have Merrimack on the 21st back in Gainesville right before Thanksgiving week. That's the last feast week prep. And then they head out to San Diego for their Rady's Children Invitational event. They'll play TCU in game 1, and then the winner of Providence, Wisconsin in game 2. So at worst, it's quad 2 out there. More likely, I think they get quad 2, quad 1. So they come out of feast week having a quad 1 with Arizona, a quad 1 in San Diego, at least one, and probably at least 2 quad 2 games, probably 3 quad 2 games, depending on what Miami does under Jay in year 1. So if 5 of your first 7 are in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2, that's great stuff. I mean, last year, remember, we were searching for 1 and 2s. I thought the schedule last year would be a little bit better. I thought Florida scheduled fine, just didn't quite turn the way they thought it would. This year, there's no such questions, right? Like the games they have are outrageous. And the point about the 5 out of 7 in quad 1 or quad 2 to open is that after that, Florida's going to play Duke at Cameron, which will be quad 1A, UConn at the Jimmy V Classic, which will be quad 1A. And then they're going to play George Washington at the Orange Bowl Classic. I know that's another one that says TBA, but Florida will be down in South Florida for that event. I don't like that event. I've never pretended to like that event much. I did throw I think the only FBH tailgate ever was a handful of years ago at that, which I combined with the Miami Gator Club. And it was fun. It was nice to see people. But that venue is, first of all, it's freezing in that building. Second of all, the sightlines are terrible. Third of all, it's always on a holiday weekend when, like, I feel like people in South Florida do their classic we're in South Florida and we have better things to do thing. So like there's never as large a Gator contingent as like there should be. I remember Florida played Utah State a handful of years ago there, and it was like a really good Utah State team, right? And I think Florida lost. And there just weren't enough Gators in the building down the stretch for it to matter. Like, I don't know. I saw some people saying, I hope Florida plays. I had some DMs, some Twitter replies like, oh, I hope the Gators play the Canes at the Orange Bowl Classic. And my kind of response to that was maybe a little too snarky, but it was like, are you crazy? Like, why would Florida play a road game? Which is what that would have been, So anyway, Florida's under contract to play there. So they've got to play the Orange Bowl Classic. I think the opponent will be George Washington. When that contract expires, hopefully Florida's not back down there in a little while. But yeah, there's my sizzling schedule hot take. But in any event, G-Dub probably quad 3. So I think you have 2 quad 4 games in your first 10 if you're the Gators. Merrimack, which is a tough quad 4, and North Florida, which will be under new leadership. But I think, like, otherwise you're going to have quad 1A against Duke and UConn. Maybe Arizona gets to quad 1A. Wisconsin will be quad 1A. You could have 4 quad 1A games in your first 10. And certainly I think 5 quad 1 games is very possible. 7 quad 1 and quad 2 games in your first 10. Then Florida comes home. It'll be St. Francis, Pennsylvania, December 17th. Team that's been to the NCAA tournament recently. Colgate, perennial Patriot League power, December 21st. Sneaky game, man. Like let's say like Florida didn't have a bunch of guys who were going to be NBA draft picks, like I'd be annoyed about scheduling Colgate right before the holiday. Because I think you always can I think you risk a stinker before Christmas with teams that aren't mature and aren't hyper competitive. Because people want to go home, right? They know that they're not going to get many days off again until April. And so, like, that chance to go home, I never want to play anybody with a pulse. Colgate has a pulse. They can score. They can rebound. They're going to play up and down. That'll be interesting. And then Dartmouth on the 29th to round out non-conference play. Little Ivy League reunion for your boy Xavion Lee. So that's the wrap on Florida's non-conference schedule. I think Arizona, Wisconsin, Duke, UConn, all guaranteed to be quad 1. You could have a quad 1 in TCU. With the neutral floor being 1-50, you never know with Miami. Maybe Jay Lucas and them are better than I think they'll be in year 1. I like what he did with the roster for the most part. I thought a couple of the takes have been a little overhyped. Like, I'm not sure that, Trey Donaldson is a guy that moves the needle from a winning standpoint, but he's certainly got Power 5 experience. The point is, like, the game will mean something to Miami, and credit to Jay for scheduling it and getting a litmus test against the reigning national champs and the best program in the state as he builds his program down in Coral Gables. I liked that hire. It'll be fun to play the Canes again. And I'm glad that Florida had 3 games against in-state opponents on their schedule. Billy Donovan always thought that was important. And he also thought it was important to showcase the program around the state. And Florida's done that for 2 years in a row, right? They've managed to play these kind of neutral site games in places 3 years in a row. Because you think back to even East Carolina, like going to different venues and showing off the program. And now Florida can still do that, but they're also challenging themselves the way that a defending national champion should challenge themselves with the schedule. Anyway, I thought a masterful job on the sketch by Todd and Jonathan Sapphire, who I know were integral to putting that thing together. Shout out to those guys and Carlin Hartman. Showing why, they're never afraid to compete. It's going to be fun. And the fact that Florida has all these meaningful games away from home is like you want to build institutional sort of, you want to lay the infrastructure for pursuing a repeat. That's how you do it. You start playing tough games away from your home building. There will be plenty of marquee games in SEC play in Gainesville. So I think the Gators doing this is lit, man. I'm pumped for it. Chance to compete against some great teams at the highest level. That, I think, is going to wrap it. We'll be back, faucet in tow, to talk more of this stuff. Patreon.com/Florida BB Hours, where you're going to get exclusive content, teasing some stuff that's upcoming there. Going to look at where Florida players are professionally, all as a popular Patreon content. And then we have a cool video coming really soon that is Tommy Houck and his, what do you call it? His recruiting kind of film from him as an AAU player and a high school recruit and a prep player. And you'll see just how Florida has done with developing him and what a remarkable story that is. So that's going to be great. Just got a comment here, just caught the end of it, but thank you for all the, you're welcome. And thank you for tuning in. So appreciative of all of you. Please tell your friends to go to patreon.com/Florida BB Hour and subscribe. There's now like the annual payment tier too. So if you get your monthly one, really, I think honestly, like Game Day Gator's fine if you just kind of tune into us during the regular season, and that's cool. But for those of you that are a little more hardcore, the Ed Quigleys of the world, the Malik Grady's, like you want that second or third tier, Rowdy Reptile, 6-man club tier, because that's going to be all your film studies for the most part. The Rowdies don't get all of it, but they get most of the stuff. That's where you want to be. So big stuff coming over there. This podcast, if you missed it on YouTube, will drop on the Patreon first, and then I'll shoot it over to the other places on the 4th of July. But I'm going to drop this today, July 3rd, just to the Patreon. So they get first access to it, and then I'll kick it over. All right. Go Gators. Keep attacking closeouts.